do ask that, and we'll talk about that in Seek. Now, that said, that leads to the next question that often brings people to Seek, which is, how does Jesus fit in with all the religions of the world? I will say, of the intellectual questions, and maybe this question isn't even an intellectual question, maybe it's just an emotional question. The question I find that almost everybody does have is, if I, like, let's say, Dave, that you're so persuasive and something good happens and maybe God's in it, and you sell me on this faith stuff, is it going to make me, for lack of a better term, a bigot? I mean, they're really afraid of that. At least in my neck of the woods, it comes up all the time. Because they feel like, you know, if I have to become a really religious person, at least in Cambridge, I don't know if it's true, wherever all of you lovely people watching these videos might live, but in Cambridge, you cannot leave your house without running into people from all over the world, from all sorts of different faith traditions. So if, by some chance, the Seek course helps people say, wow, I think this is really helpful to me. Maybe it's even, quote, true. Maybe it could be useful in my life. Maybe Jesus is a part of it. They wonder, does this mean that I have to then look at every single neighbor and say, oh, I've had this great experience, and I'm sorry to tell you, you're wrong, you're wrong. You're wrong. You in the back, wrong, 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 wrong. But happily, I'm right, which is good. And, you know, there we go. So people are wondering, if Jesus is helpful, how does he fit in with everything else that's out there? And is he going to drive me away from all my friends? I think is a question that comes up not infrequently. But people wonder, I want to find a way to navigate that, and that's often a reason people come to Seek. Maybe life doesn't really work unless you're richly connected to a living God. What if that's true? What if somehow we're created, that if we are created, but what if we are, and there's something in us which needs a connection to God? If that's just part of the human condition, if it's the, as it were, the gas our car is meant to run on, what would be the implications of that? And how could I figure that out? And how could I get the right fuel that I'm not trying to run my car on Coke or something like that, which probably wouldn't go as well? You know, it's interesting. This guy, Tim Kasser, who wrote The High Price of Materialism, this book I just mentioned, he's a psychologist. And so he's into theories, psychological theories, one of which he has his own stages of need theory, a hierarchy of needs. So he's not the most famous person. A guy named Maslow was famous for that. But he has his own. And as I read his hierarchy of needs, and I'll tell you what they are in a minute, what was so striking to me was, I'm pretty sure that Jesus specifically directly addresses each need. Bang, 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 bang. Here's how to get those needs met. So his first is safety/security. Basic needs being met. We've got a roof over our heads. We aren't going to have marauding invaders. My family's safe. Need one, fair enough. Need two, he says, is interesting. He says it's competence. Once we know our basic needs are met, what we all need to know is that we can do something, that we have some value in the world, that we contribute. And so we're competent at something else. His third, which I might have put second, is connection. Once we know our needs are met and we're competent, we kind of want to know that we're part of a bigger world, that people like us, that we like them, that we have a relational network to work our way through. And maybe a connection, I suppose, even to God. Connectedness in general in the world. And then his fourth, if we get that far, he calls actualization, where now we need to know that we're uniquely about something. It's not just that I can be a good mechanic, but who am I? You know, who am I really? What am I meant to do is his highest need, which not many people get to on his theory. Now, it seems to me Jesus directly addresses all four, quite specifically. And so that question of maybe life doesn't really work unless you kind of know what's the key that fits the lock, just on all those fundamental human needs, that brings often people to Seek to chat about this. And finally, maybe we're meant to experience a fundamental forgiveness and freedom from shame. Not everyone comes in with this one, but some people it's a huge deal. So for some people, they're not in touch with feeling shame about anything. But for other people, they really are. And there's a fundamental sense that they are screwed up. I mean, they have problems they can't get past. They feel embarrassed about those problems all the time. They leave the house constantly feeling like, you're going to look at me, and you know, my body doesn't look great, and if you only knew what I'd done, and I don't like my choices when I go home at night. I don't like me. I feel shame. And they wonder, how am I going to get out of that? And so I actually meet a fair number of people who say, well, I've heard rumors that maybe God can help me with that. And, you know, I don't know, maybe that's glib. But if Seek could help point me a direction to address something so profound and so fundamental, that'd be great. I mean, that would be pretty central. That would change everything about my experience of living. And so at least that gets us in the room and starts a conversation, and maybe that's your story as well. Let me tell you a bit more about my own journey of faith, and then close by talking about two different types of faith, and maybe talk about the faith that we've rejected, if we have rejected a faith, isn't actually faith. It's a certain sort of faith, and maybe there are other alternatives. And I'll try to tease out what those other alternatives might be. So in terms of my own story, we have left me when I am this debating high school student. I go on to a college, and my first week in college, my freshman orientation week, I'm in my freshman dormitory, and I discover there are 3 churchgoers right next to me. I think, fantastic. I know what I do with churchgoers. I debate them because they are wrong. And so I said, oh, you're a churchgoer. That's interesting. Want to tell me why? You know, so I'm such a nice guy. I'm making friends and meeting people, and socially skilled as I was at the time, and as I am now. That's pretty much probably my opener. And what I discovered was these guys were both really good-natured. They were perfectly willing to get into it with me, and way smarter than anyone had ever talked about this with. And so they said, sure, let's chat. And so we start chatting about this. We have our give and take. I'm proud to say I think I held my own, but I didn't best them in the ways I was accustomed to. And we drew a crowd. We drew probably 30 people who were cheering on the various side they felt in the argument around us. And so early on in my experience of my new life in this college, I was very popular and famous as our dorm atheist. That went super well. My roommate was an atheist. We bonded over atheism. And yet, a few months into my college experience, things began to go bad for me. I began to have some problems in classes. I ended up doing fine in my college. I graduated just fine. But early on, I was having some usual freshman struggles, and things weren't going so well. I got mocked in a class for something I thought I had done exceptionally well. And I thought, if he's mocking what I think is one of the best things I've ever done, what does that mean about me? Maybe I'm just hopeless. And what does that mean? Maybe my whole plan, that I got to get the good grades, to get to the good college, to get the good job, to make good money, to marry a good person, and to die and leave it all to somebody else. What does it mean if it all stops at this level? What if I'm not going to succeed here? What if I'm going to fail? Does my whole life crash? And I went into this little mini depression. And I thought to myself, all I want to do is have some comfort that it's going to be okay. Where do I get that? I couldn't imagine. I thought, do I call home? Mom, Dad, I'm failing up here. I thought, that's just too pathetic. I won't do it. I didn't have great friends for my couple of months on this campus to comfort me and say, Dave, I believe in you, and it's going to work out fine. They couldn't pull it off. So I thought, I don't know how to feel better. And suddenly I thought, maybe those church-going guys are right. What if, I admit I haven't been open to this for years, but what if they're right? What if there's a God? All I would want from that God is a sense that it was going to be okay, some sense that there's somebody who sees me. And if that's possible, that'd be great. And so I tried something. I went into my dorm room. I shut all the doors, I put all the shades down, and I prayed for the first time since I was, 7, 8, and I said, God, I don't believe you're real, but on the off chance that I'm wrong, today would be an outstanding day to tell me. Amen. And nothing much happened, no lightning, nothing. And so I stopped at that. Well, I want to get off this campus. This place depresses me. I was lucky enough to have a car. And so I thought, I'll go see a movie. Now, in going to see this movie, I grabbed some cassette tapes in that era that my sister had gotten me, my sister who'd gotten us out of churches. She at that time was a Taoist, but had been invited to a retreat about Jesus. And she'd gone and liked it. And so she said, oh, I think you might like this. I'm not trying to convert you. I am, after all, a Taoist. But it was really great, and I think you might enjoy it. But I'd gotten all huffy. I'd just gone back to her saying, well, I'm glad you liked it, but I think you know it's not for me, and I'm not going to listen to him. Because that's the sort of guy I was. Warm-hearted, big-spirited. What can I say? So I had listened to him, but I hadn't thrown him away. And so that day, I thought, well, maybe this is the day to listen to these. I pop one in, and I go see a movie. As I'm driving, I'm hearing this guy talk about Jesus using coherent sentences. He actually speaks quite thoughtfully, and I appreciate it. And I thought, well, I'm not having problems with this. You know, you're telling me good, solid reasons why I should consider Jesus. Fair enough. I see my movie. It's great. I'm driving back, and I get disoriented, which is rare. I have a pretty good sense of direction, but I'm new to this area. And I think, am I supposed to be going on the street? Maybe I need to take a right. I take the right, and it's utterly clear I've gone the wrong way. That's a deserted road. I clearly hadn't gone on that road. And so I do this trick that you probably wouldn't have to do anymore given current technology, and I wouldn't recommend anyway, which is I keep driving slowly. There's nobody on this road, totally deserted. I'm driving slowly. I put on the dome light in my car, and I get a map out from the dashboard, and I hold it with my hand on the steering wheel. I'm kind of looking at cross streets as I'm going by. I'm thinking, am I here? Am I here? I'm looking up. And as I look down, the road forks while I'm looking down, and I go straight. Now, I am going slow. It's not like I was careening in kind of a Thelma and Louise arc over something big. Going slow, and it wasn't even a canyon. It was like a little hill. And so I'm bumping. I slam on the brakes, and I slam into a big, thick post. And I think, wow. And it wasn't, again, I'm just hoping I didn't ruin the post. I'm not worried about my car. I've got one of these, I think it was a Volvo with bumpers that was just like this. So there was really no way to hurt the car. But I catch my breath, and I slowly back down the hill. And I'm inclined on this hill. And I look at this post, and I realize I haven't actually hit a post. I've hit a giant floodlit cross, a wooden cross. It was a church that was on this little hill that I'd run up into, and I'd rammed into their cross. And so as I'm angled up, I'm looking at this thing, and I'm hearing the guy on the tape talk about Jesus, really thoughtful, think about him. And I'm thinking to myself, most days this would not have affected me. But just today I did, in fact, pray, God, if there is a God, it would be great if you'd show me. And technically speaking, how many other crosses have I rammed? I don't remember any. And so I slowly back down the hill. I check the cross. It seems fine. And I get back in the car. I kind of catch my breath. I keep driving. I get lost a second time. And so I said to myself, sheesh. So I think, pull over this time. Don't be a fool. There's a lit parking lot. I pull into the parking lot. I check a cross street as I go in. I park there. I'm looking. I think, okay, I know where I am. I pull back out, and I've parked under a giant floodlit cross. It was a church parking lot. I hadn't noted that. And they had a cross in it, and I pulled up right underneath it. And so I'm pulling back. I think, that's a giant floodlit cross. That's the second in 10 minutes. I mean, what are the odds? And right at that moment, I have this strong impression. I wouldn't call it exactly a voice. It was certainly internal to me, but it was a super, super strong impression. And the impression was, Dave, you always wondered or always thought that if there was a God, the good news would be that that God cares about humanity. I'm here to tell you, there is a God, and I care about you. I strongly felt that.